The sky once meant freedom, but in the 20th century, it became something else. Imagine looking up and hearing a distant roar, not birds, but engines. Then the sound grows louder, turns into a scream, and seconds later, the ground explodes beneath you. Cities burn, people run, and death comes from above. Today, we're going to find out. How did aviation turn from a dream into a weapon of terror? Who secretly rebuilt an air force when it was completely banned? How did future war pilots train while the whole world was watching? And who actually stood behind the creation of one of the most feared air forces in history? At the center of this story is one man, a quiet strategist who didn't chase fame, but shaped everything behind the scenes. The 20th century began with incredible technological breakthroughs. What once sounded impossible became reality almost overnight. But progress didn't just bring convenience, it brought destruction. Fertilizers turned into poison gas, tractors became tanks, and aircraft, once fragile machines made of wood and fabric, turned into weapons. During World War I, aviation evolved at an insane speed. In just a decade, it went from experimental gliders to armed fighter planes. At first, aircraft were used for reconnaissance, observing enemy positions and directing artillery. But very quickly, they became tools of combat. Pilots in those early days were not ordinary soldiers. Many came from wealthy families with titles and education. Before the war, they flew together in international aviation clubs. Then suddenly, they found themselves on opposite sides. Up in the sky, far above the trenches, a strange kind of war emerged. Pilots saw themselves as knights of the air. They painted their planes, created personal symbols, and followed unwritten rules of honor. But that illusion didn't last. The moment machine guns were mounted on aircraft, everything changed. Air combat became brutal and unforgiving. Planes were fragile. Just a few bullets could send them spiraling out of control. Death came fast. Out of this chaos, legends were born. The most famous among them was a German pilot known as the Red Baron, a man who became the symbol of aerial warfare. But the war ended, not in the sky, on the ground. Empires collapsed, and the pilots who survived went their separate ways. Some continued fighting in new conflicts. Some faded into obscurity. Some, like one future key figure, drifted through strange jobs, even business ventures abroad. But one thing was clear. Aviation had proven its value, and it wasn't going away. Still, after the war, Germany faced strict limitations. Under international agreements, it was forbidden from having an air force. All military aircraft had to be destroyed. And yet, the story didn't end there, because one man refused to let it die. A former officer with deep experience in military intelligence and aviation began quietly rebuilding what was lost. By the early 20th century, he had already worked in communications, rail logistics, and intelligence, eventually rising to the general staff. During World War I, he was responsible for air reconnaissance and later became one of the top figures overseeing Germany's air capabilities. After the war, officially, there was nothing left. Unofficially, he changed everything. He gathered the surviving pilots, the best of the best, and kept them connected. No planes, no official structure, but the core was still there. Then came his bold idea. If Germany couldn't build an air force at home, it could do it somewhere else. He secretly established contact with the Soviet Union. Both countries had something in common: isolation and restrictions. One lacked technology, the other was forbidden from developing it. Together, they made a deal. Deep inside Soviet territory, far from international oversight, a secret flight school was created. German and Soviet pilots trained side by side. New aircraft were tested. Combat tactics were developed, all hidden from the rest of the world. This operation became one of the most important steps in rebuilding Germany's future air power. But it wasn't easy. Construction delays, mysterious accidents, sabotage, even poisoning of key personnel. Foreign intelligence services were clearly aware something was happening. Still, the project moved forward. Hundreds of pilots were trained, fighters, bombers, reconnaissance crews. But even here, there was tension. German instructors didn't share all their knowledge equally. Soviet pilots often received less advanced training. By 1933, everything changed. A new leader came to power in Germany, and with one decision, he shut down the entire operation. The cooperation ended instantly. The schools were closed, personnel withdrawn, but the damage, or rather the foundation, had already been laid. Because while this secret program was running abroad, something else was happening back in Germany. A massive hidden system of pilot training. Across the country, aviation clubs began appearing everywhere. Officially, they were harmless. Hobby groups, sports flying, glider training. But in reality, they were preparing thousands of future military pilots. They used simulators, watched recorded aerial combat, practiced maneuvers, all under the guise of civilian activity. There were no weapons, no military labels, nothing that violated international law. But everyone knew what it really was. Among those rising through this system was a man who would later become the public face of Germany's air power. Charismatic, ambitious, and deeply controversial. But even he was not the true architect, because behind the scenes, the same quiet strategist continued shaping the future. And soon, everything he built in secret would become something the world could no longer ignore. The German blitzkrieg in Western Europe didn't really begin on the battlefield. It started in offices in Berlin. While generals and admirals argued over strategy, each one tried to claim future glory for themselves. The Navy wanted dominance at sea, the Army leaned on old plans, and the Air Force promised total destruction from the sky. At the center of it all stood one man, convinced that air power alone could decide the war. Poland had already shown cracks in that belief. Despite bold claims, the first strikes missed their targets, and Polish aircraft were evacuated just hours before attacks. German bombers struggled with accuracy, dive bombers faced unexpected anti-air defenses, and air superiority came only after Poland ran out of fighters. Still, he dismissed criticism, blamed others, and pushed forward, convinced the Air Force had proven its strength. That confidence carried into 1940. In the Netherlands and France, airborne assaults and bombing campaigns had mixed results. Some operations succeeded dramatically, like airborne troops breaking fortified defenses, but others exposed serious flaws: poor coordination, friendly fire, and heavy losses. Yet despite these problems, he claimed victory and doubled down on a bold idea: breaking Britain from the air before any invasion. The Battle of Britain became the ultimate test. Massive air fleets were launched to crush British defences, targeting airfields, infrastructure, and cities. But Britain had advantages: fighting over home territory, faster pilot recovery, and a resilient defence system. German fighters had limited range, bombers suffered losses, and the campaign stalled. When air superiority failed, the strategy shifted to bombing cities, hoping terror would force surrender. It didn't. Frustration grew. Promises had been made that no enemy bombs would fall on Germany, but British bombers reached Berlin. Blame spread downward through the ranks, but the core problem remained. The Air Force could not deliver decisive victory. With Britain holding firm, attention turned east. The invasion of the Soviet Union became a gamble on scale and speed. The opening strikes were devastating. Airfields, supply depots, and communication hubs were destroyed in massive coordinated attacks. Thousands of aircraft were lost in days. It looked like total dominance, but only at first. As the war dragged on, cracks widened. Soviet production moved beyond reach, losses increased, and logistics became strained. In places like Stalingrad, the Air Force tried to support trapped ground forces, but failed. Supply missions delivered only a fraction of what was needed. Promises of rescue collapsed into catastrophe. Meanwhile, a different war was unfolding in the skies over Germany. Allied bombing campaigns grew stronger, targeting industry and cities. Air defenses improved, radars, anti-aircraft guns, and new tactics. But it wasn't enough. Losses mounted, and the once dominant Air Force was forced into a defensive role. There were flashes of innovation. New technologies appeared: guided bombs, advanced targeting systems, and even the world's first operational jet fighters. These jets were fast, deadly, and nearly unstoppable in combat. But they came too late. There wasn't enough fuel, trained pilots, or time. Desperation led to extreme measures: emergency fighter programs, poorly trained recruits, and rushed production filled the skies with machines that couldn't change the outcome. Strategic bombing crippled infrastructure, resources ran dry, and control of the air was lost for good. In the final stage of the war, the Air Force that once aimed to dominate Europe could barely defend its own skies. Cities burned under relentless bombing, and remaining aircraft were thrown into hopeless battles. Even the most advanced weapons couldn't reverse the collapse. In the end, it wasn't a single defeat that destroyed it, but a chain of decisions driven by overconfidence, miscalculation, and the belief that air power alone could win a total war. Live in the moment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.